Okay, I'm not sure that it worked. Let me double check. There we are. Shabbat Shalom to everyone joining us on Facebook. I am going to put in the comments the link to Sefaria, which is where you can access the text that we are learning from. We are going to start in the Mishnah or verse number 8 in just a moment. But first, we're gonna say we're gonna start with a Shalom chant and then the morning blessing and the blessing before studying the Torah. So that should get us in the mood, that should get us started and set the energies for the class. So for now, just I invite you to close your eyes. I invite you to find your breath. And just to spend a couple of, maybe just a minute, actually just relaxing the belly, relaxing the muscles of the face. And just letting everything else around, just let everything be. And just be with the breath. And just tasting the aliveness of being. And from that place, from that center, I invite you to draw a breath for Shalom. מודה אני לפניך. Holy One of Being, how unfathomably grateful I am to know that I am in your presence right now. You within me within you, surrounding all worlds, infusing all worlds. Melech Chai v'Kayam, you, Holy One, our source, the ground of all that isness itself. שהחזרת בי נשמתי בחמלה. In your great compassion, in your boundless mercy, You breathe moment to moment within us. An awake soul. Rabba emunatecha. Your faith in each and every one of us is boundless. Amen. The words for the blessing, allowing us to study Torah, to busy ourselves with spiritual teaching, and with Asher Kedeshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Join me. Baruch Ata Adonai, Eloheinu melech ha'olam, Asher Kedeshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Amen. So welcome everybody, whether you're joining us here in our Zoom platform or are connecting to us through Facebook, through YouTube. We are continuing our journey through studying Pirkei Avot, the first principles of the Talmud. Actually, this is a tractate of the Talmud. We are still, after so many weeks, chapter 1, but we have reached all the way to the 8th Mishnah. Mishnah 8, the 8th teaching, if you'd like, or the 8th verse. So I'm hoping that you are either on the right page, if you have a page in front of you, or since there is the Sefaria link connection, that you are in the right scrolling place on your computer. Mishnah 8, Chet. I'd like to, so for those of us who are on Zoom, you can remain muted. If there is background noise behind you, that's fine. If not, you can unmute yourself. If the room around is pretty quiet, but if you decide to stay muted, please make sure to unmute yourself. If you want to share in a comment, ask a question, this is supposed to be interactive, and every thought that arises, every question that comes up for you is welcome in this conversation. I say that every time, but I think it bears, and it's worth restating. And with that, I'd like to invite any one of you to read for us that 8th Mishnah. Anyone, really. Just unmute yourself and go.
Yudah ben Tabai and Shimon ben Shatak received the oral tradition from them. Judah ben Tabai said, "Do not as a judge play the part of an advocate. And when the litigants are standing before you, look upon them as if they were both guilty. And when they leave your presence, look upon them as if they were both innocent when they have accepted the judgment."
Okay. Very good. So let me just briefly set up for you who those two leaders are. Yehuda ben Tabai probably was, even though we're not exactly sure, was the Av of the Beit Din, was the leader of the Beit Din, the head of the court. But it is possible that it was Shimon ben Shattach. There is, in fact, confusion between who was in what job. It seems that Shimon ben Shattach was the Nasi, so the Nasi is the president, the political leader. And Yehuda ben Tabai was the leader of the Beit Din, of the rabbis, if you want, of the legal religious group. It seems that there was a lot of turmoil at the time. So we're talking about the time before. We're talking about already we are in Roman times, and this is probably during the reign of King Yanai again. And as you remember from last time, this was a very dangerous time because the King Yanai was very violent actually towards the religious leadership, and there were some people who were murdered, killed during his time. And Rabbi Shimon ben Shattach, it says that he fled actually to Alexandria at some point and only returned. And so because of that moment of him leaving and then coming back, Yehuda ben Tabai kind of took both roles and then surrendered one of the roles. So we're not exactly sure who had which role in the end. What we know about about Shimon ben Shattach of the two was that he had several things that he managed to actually create that didn't exist before him. One was he's the one who instituted the Ketubah. So the Ketubah is the Jewish marriage contract, if you want. So we're talking that until about, so we're around 1st century BCE, between the 2nd and 1st century BCE at that time. And this is the time that, thanks to Shimon ben Shattach, the Ketubah is created. So understand that up until this moment, there was no marriage contract. What the marriage contract came to represent, understand that marriage at the time was not based on two people falling in love together and therefore getting married. As we well know from old stories, families got together and marriages were arranged so that property could be shared together, so that wealth could be consolidated. There's a lot of it. It was really almost a business deal between families when people got married. And with that, there was no protection for the women, for the bride, for the wife. And and Shimon ben Shattach instituted the Ketubah, which was the first time, probably in world history, that women could actually enter into marriage with a piece of paper that gave them rights to divorce. It's not as, it wasn't, don't think that 2,000 years ago it would be as easy as now, and it's not easy today, but at the time it was even not, it was even less than that. But there were provisions now in Jewish law that allowed a woman to divorce her husband. There were special cases for that to happen. And not only that, but she would leave the marriage with financial support and financial compensation. So she would not be destitute. She would leave the marriage with something. It was oftentimes important, specifically when husbands went to war and never came back, and oftentimes their bodies weren't found, their bodies disappeared, or they went on a seafaring mission and the ship sank and there was no way to recover the body. Jewish law needs a recovered body in order to acknowledge death. And so for women who were left without a husband and didn't have a way to break free from the marriage, that now there was the Ketubah. So that's a huge deal actually for Jewish jurisprudence, if you want, for Jewish law. And not only that, but Shimon ben Shattach established as well the first Jewish elementary schools. For the first time, there was a thinking that we should educate our very young. I mean, understand that this is also something completely amazing. I mean, we won't see in the Western world, in Europe, supposedly a more advanced civilization, a need to educate children way until just a few hundred years ago, actually. The only kind of school that would have been available to anyone was those who were destined to the priesthood, and therefore in the church they entered the church the church learning process in order to become a priest at the time. So so we're really talking a long time, and obviously not available to the general, not to all children. Most of the European population was illiterate and not educated at all. But in Judaism, this process of wanting to educate our children starts about over 1,000 years ago, over 2,000 years ago. So that's also one of his major accomplishments. And the third one was he set up specifically education for orphaned children. So the first orphanages also began to have education connected to that. So really, this Shimon ben Shattach had incredible ideas and made a lot of social changes in Jewish life. So now that we set up the context of who these two teachers, who these two leaders are, let's take a look at what they taught. And we start with Yehuda ben Tabai. And he says, and I'm going to repeat because now it's a little bit far from us. Judah ben Tabai said, "Do not, as a judge, play the part of an advocate, of a lawyer, basically, a defendant. And when the litigants are standing before you, look upon them as if they were both guilty. And when they leave your presence, look upon them as if they were both innocent, when they have accepted the judgment." All right, so what's our first reaction to this saying?
Well, it's kind of opposite of the premise on which our law is built, which is that you're innocent until proven guilty. And here it seems you're guilty until proven innocent.
Right.
If I remember right, my French friend, it's how Napoleonic law works, is that you are considered guilty until proven innocent. But that's kind of interesting that they do it in that way. You know, it's like, but innocence in this case is not based upon proving that you didn't do it, but rather proven on that you're willing to accept the judgment.
Right. Right. So it sets up as there should be no partisanship, right? There should be no, if you don't confuse your role, is kind of, I think it seems to be saying, if you're the judge, don't also be the defending lawyer. right? So first of all, just know your role in this situation, and don't play favors, right? Don't start a trial with preconceived notions of who's guilty, who's innocent. Don't be swayed by whatever the context of the story is. Remain impartial. But then, like you said, Rach, it's like start with thinking that everybody's guilty. Right? Everybody's guilty.
It's also interesting to me. I just got through reading a book on the legal procedures of the Nuremberg trials. And one of the things that they discussed in there was, okay, you had judges from 4 countries.
Right.
Britain, the US, France, and Russia. And in Britain and the US, it is the prosecuting and defense attorneys who question and examine witnesses. And the judges just listen. But in France and Russia, the judges are the ones who do the questioning. And the attorney's only job is to help their client to form his brief and to advise them on how to answer. And the compromises that they came through in the legal system used in the Nuremberg trials, because of these 2 opposing views on how it's done. And one of the things they did say is while the advocates could, were the ones who would examine and cross-examine, judges could break in and do their own cross-examinations at any time they wish. But, it's interesting because it sounds to me like in the Beit Din, it is the judge's responsibility to question and examine the litigants, not advocates.
Yeah. All right. Anybody else?
I was noticing in here too, and I don't know, maybe get a little bit ahead, but it talks about litigants.
Yes.
And when it says the word litigants, to me it sounds like it's a civil trial. But then down below it says both guilty. And I guess that's not, in a civil trial, we wouldn't use the term guilty. We'd say liable or something, but not.
Right.
The Beit Din would rule on civil and criminal matters.
Yes, indeed. Yes. I'm looking for the word in Hebrew. Yeah, it's din. So it would be the same word actually.
The same word for what?
So the Hebrew actually, it's interesting. The Hebrew for guilty uses the word rasha. The regular word that I would know would be Hashem. And not Hashem, for those of us who know Hebrew with a Hey, Hashem with an Aleph. So this doesn't say Hashem, it says Rasha, Rashaim. So not really guilty, but evil or bad people. So don't see them, right? Yube'einecha. So it says in Hebrew, Yihiyu be'einecha kereshaim. Hold them in your eyes, right? As bad people, both of them. And then when the trial is over, zakai, that's zakaim, so that's really innocent. So in this case it's actually true. So that's the word in Hebrew. It's not guilty, it's rasha, rashaim, evil people, bad people. Consider them bad people. Right? It's almost like, understand that there's always this philosophical debate, right, between those who believe that at the core human beings are good, and those who say no, at the core human beings aren't good. So I don't know if that's connecting, but that's interesting that the judge would actually start with, at the core, they're not good. Neither one of them is good. Now let's go through the let's go through the trial and see what happens.
Yeah, some of it almost gets back to the Tanya again when we were studying that.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Everybody has to hold themselves as not good, right? Until and work on changing that to the best of our ability. So, let's turn the tables a little bit, instead of seeing it really as as a court matter. Let's look at an inner court matter, right? Because all of us have within ourselves competing voices, right, that are challenging each other in trying to grab our attention. And sometimes, especially in matters where we haven't done something that is necessarily good, right? We have sinned, we have hurt somebody, we have acted in a way that is not becoming of us, or whatever the story is, right? There's always the parts of ourselves, one that says, oh my God, what have I done? And what that says tries to rationalize our behavior, right? So this for me, it's a lot about, how do we deal with those inner voices, right? How do we deal with this competing aspects of ourselves? Especially like when we sit in meditation, I find a lot of that arising, a lot of competing thought that are trying to grab my attention. And one of the ways that I try to deal with that is, to start with all thoughts are evil. No, all of those voices are rasha. They're just like, they're here to torture me. They're here to take my attention away from, whatever my focus is for the meditation, right? So the inner trial of all my inner voices really start with, you're evil. I don't want to engage with those, right? And so how do we see this as also part of this very human ongoing inner wrestling? I'm actually asking. Should we, like you said, like it's really close to what the Tanya was saying, right? All of those voices, anything that comes out of ego, right? Ego is that impulse that tries to, or that actually is the embodiment of moving away from, of knowing our source, right? It's pushing us towards this mistaken sense of identity. It wants us to identify with it, that ego. So it's pushing us away from knowing source, from knowing that in fact what is at the core of who we are is the Holy One of all being, right? But it moves us to attach, in fact, to its stories, to its narrative, to its complaining, to its whatever that is, right, in order to distract us from knowing our source. And it does an incredible job at it. And it's been doing that incredible job for so long that in fact it's really, really hard for us to look at whatever ego is bringing to our attention and say, Biladai, now that's not me. It's not who I am. It's not the truth. It's not the truth. It's just a story, right? So we have all the time those litigants that are coming in front of us, arguing this point, arguing that point, right? And perhaps this is telling us that we should really look at all of those inner conflicting voices as Rasha'im, right? They are there to distract us. They are there to move us away from source and from the core of who we are.
it also sounds like, with that conversation that's going on in your head, that it's like dualism trying to impress itself upon, I'll say monism for lack of a better term, but it's that dualism trying to invade into monism and say, no, see, you really are a separate individual, and there really are two sides to this.
Right. Right.
And that's where, like you said in Hebrew, or like they say in Sanskrit, neti neti,
Right. Not this, not that. Right. Biladai in Hebrew.
Biladai.
Yeah. So I really connect a lot with that, because this is really my inner experience, especially in meditation, but really all the time. But I also like the second part of it. It says at the end, right, when all is done, consider them as innocent, right? So it's really about integrate those voices again as part of the experience, but they no longer have a charge for you. So at first, when we first start to meditate, all of the voices are coming, and they are arguing this point and that point. And at first, maybe as beginners in meditation, we have to see them as reshaim, meaning that we don't want to engage with them. We move away from them. We don't engage. We don't collapse into whatever it is they are telling us. We distance ourselves from them. We focus only on whatever it is that the guru has told us, the rabbi has told us, the meditation leader has told us to focus on, and ignore everything else. Ignore the reshaim, ignore the evil voices, right? But as we continue and progress in our meditation and really find our source and really find our grounding and really find our center, really find that place of awareness that is grounded, right, in itself, and we start to really see all of those voices, and they no longer stick, right? Before that, we need to push them back because they were sticking, but now we became like this Teflon observer, right? And everything arises. And now it doesn't stick anymore. We can watch them arise, and then that thought comes up, and then it disappears. And then another thought comes up, and then it disappears. And then this sensation arises, itching, poking, discomfort, it arises. And then if we just watch, it goes away. And then that emotion arises because of that thought. And then, there is a sense of heat, or the throat tightens, or there is this. And so we watch that because we observe, it comes and it goes, everything comes and goes, right? So now we are in this place after time of practicing where things the voices can come and go. They're still there, right? But they no longer stick. So we can look at them now as innocent. I think this is kind of the image. We can look at them and say, oh, look at you, you're here. But now I don't care. You can be here because I don't fear that I'm going to collapse into your story. I don't fear that I'm going to attach to, this very juicy thing you're saying. Now I can look at you and say, you can. It's okay for you to be here because I know you're just here for a moment or two and you're going to go away, and then something else will come and I'll still watch, and that's okay. And I can watch everything arise, right? So to me, this is kind of this. There are so many layers in how we can really look at this, but if we look at it from an inner perspective, I can see this as well as a practice, right? As the litigants are the inner voices. How's that land for anyone? I'm curious.
Well, I can see if you can kind of separate yourself, make yourself the observer, where you might be able to better accept the judgment because the idea of you being guilty doesn't stick to you.
Right.
So you can better be able to accept a judgment, whatever it is, because you're looking at it from the standpoint of an observer rather than that defining you.
I think what considering the voices as Rashaim it's positions you as being skeptical of whatever they are saying, like a judge, really, in a real trial, right? When witnesses come, or people are arguing this way or that way, the judge has to remain really skeptical of whatever he or she is hearing, right? In order to not be swayed until all the arguments have been heard, and then only then consider everything and render judgment. So that's the impulse is to really remain skeptical of all of it, which is exactly what we do in meditation, by the way.
Yeah.
Right? The act of, if you remain skeptical, then the voices come and you don't engage.
Yeah.
So can I just add one more little piece?
Yeah.
And in Malcolm Gladwell's book, Talking to Strangers, he talks about how we default to truth, and that can really mess us up. And he specifically has that case in front of a judge where, if you see someone in front of you, you think sometimes that you default to truth, but it can really mess you up sometimes and be really wrong. So yeah, having that skepticism is a little bit extra important, because we have this automatic thing where I don't know if I have it, but where we want to trust people, right? Where we default to trusting people.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. That's really good. Yeah, it's really good. Yeah, so I don't know, maybe innocent until proven guilty. Maybe the Pirkei Avot had it right. Maybe it should be the opposite, right? So that we don't default, like Amy's saying, we don't default to truth. Let's start with skepticism.
Maybe I'm looking at this a little too literally, but I am playing the part of the judge. And so I hear conflicting stories, and maybe it's internal conflicting things. And it says that those things become innocent or acceptable when they have accepted the judgment.
Yeah.
So the question is, who's they and who made the judgment? And if I'm the judge, then I made the judgment. And so I have a little trouble thinking about how these conflicting thoughts are going to accept my judgment.
You mean in the context of meditation, as I was mentioning?
Yeah.
Oh, well, meditation gets you to radical acceptance. That's the ultimate stage, really, where that's really actually the place where you're just there's acceptance of what is, as is, completely and totally. So this is what I see by that closing, that concluding sentence there, which is the hardest thing to do, is to be with what is. I mean, most of the time we really want to be with the thoughts that we like, right? we want to be with the thoughts that that reinforce what we already know, right? We want to be with the truths that that will reinforce what our ego is saying, right? There's a great book by Krishnamurti that talks about freedom from the known, and I think this is where this kind of acceptance comes to, right? The litigants are all the truths that we either already agree with or disagree with, right? On whatever side, and we really have to hold both as equally reshaim, right? Because if we collapse into wanting the truth that we desire, or running away from the truth that we want to escape or disagree with, then we're still caught. We're still caught in that cycle. We're still caught in the world of thought, in the world of illusion. So as Krishnamurti says, we really we have to free ourselves from the known, from all we think we know, all we think we already, all the truth we already have. And it's really about, ultimately, it's about accepting whatever those truths are, but they no longer have a charge. Like, I don't know how to say that. You know, that when I was talking about the Teflon thing, then maybe it's a different way of seeing it, but they no longer have a charge for us. They no longer, we don't want to defend them anymore. A lot of what gets us in trouble is that we always want to defend what we think is true, right? Whatever story we have come to believe, we definitely want to defend that. We want to protect that. And whatever it is we do not believe, or we think other believes and is evil, that's really a lot of what happens in conflicting perspectives. Then we shut it down, right? We close off from that. But that's also a story. So the radical acceptance, really, for me, is this complete Teflon. It's like, you can have your truth. I can see all my truth arising, and none of it is real. It's all story. And the truth that I had 20 years ago, I don't have them anymore. So maybe the truth that I have now will be different in 10, 20 years. So why should I, be so defensive of what I think I know right now, when in fact, I might completely be in error, and in fact, I will change my mind probably in a week or two weeks or whatever, right? So I think that's where the acceptance comes in.
Well, then how do people make decisions about change?
So you make decisions with what you have in the moment. That's all you can do. Rami Shapiro, talks about that, and when that question comes up, he says the best thing you can do is to, how does he say that? It's like you're on a boat on the ocean, and the waves are moving this way, and you're trying to get there, but then you're moved over here. All you can do is move the flaps a little bit. Move the flaps so that the boat veers this way or veers that way. And it's in the moment what is being called for us to do with who we are in the moment of what we are, and how we channel whatever it is that right now calls to be done, we do. But the difference is that we do not get attached to the outcome, and we don't seek to know or care whether people will agree with us or not, or whether we will, get a little pat on the back for doing good or doing this, right? It's disinterested, and it's also letting go of knowing the outcome of it. Like, we have to act. In Hebrew, we'd say al-blind. We have to act blindly, right? Without worrying about whether the decision we're making in this moment, because that's what needs to be made, the decision that needs to be made now, is a good decision or a bad decision. We will only know maybe 10 years from now. We will maybe know, So that's how you do it. You just, in the moment, make the decision that you must make to affect change, if that's what you want, or to stay the course, if that's what you want. It's not even what you want, is what's called what you feel is called to be done.
It's interesting when I was reading, the more I was thinking about this when I was reading it, I was thinking about when I got training in grad school in couples counseling, which is part of the training for a psych nurse practitioner. And the professor said two things that always stuck with me because I discovered them to be true. One of which is, when a couple comes in to your office or clinic, one thing that they're both thinking is, after I explain this person is going to see what a total wretch my partner is and is going to help me to fix them. Right. And the second thing is that when a couple comes into the room, there are three sides to the story.
Right.
What this person said happened, what that person said happened, and what happened.
Right.
You know, and those are things that you have to keep in mind as a counselor.
Right.
But, you know, I look where he says you've got to consider both people guilty, because both are coming in with the attitude of the guilt lies on the other person. And it's your job to see where both people have responsibility for this goat rodeo, you know?
Right. That's
so,
good.
Yeah.
Great. Good. I'm sure we could keep on talking. I think Shimon ben Shattach's teaching is also very closely related to what we are saying. Mishnah 9, I'm going to read it because it's a very short one. Shimon ben Shattach says, interrogate the witnesses extensively, yet be cautious with your words, lest they learn from them to lie. What the Sefaria says is, Shimon ben Shattach used to say, be thorough in the interrogation of witnesses, and be careful with your words, lest from them they learn to lie. What comes up?
People can which you use whether or not you're prejudiced one way or the other, or where your sympathies lie.
Right.
Or if you're the mom of two exuberant children, they find, oh, mom's sympathetic to this concept. Let me expand upon the righteousness of my move in that direction. Just in a very tangible, concrete example that you can definitely.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly what I was thinking, actually. It's so true, right? How people can read us and then, know which buttons to push, or, how we will respond to this input or that input. Yeah, so, yeah. It's not just be cautious with your words in this case. It's be cautious with your attitude, with your physical or your body, your physical expression, your body movements. We learn from physical cues as much, if not more, than from listening to words. So definitely that was so, it's so clear. It's right there. Thanks, Rachel. That was awesome.
There's a great example of that in Malcolm Gladwell's book, David and Goliath, about an attorney, I think his name is Boyer, who had some challenge. Anyway, he learned to be a great listener, and he had this great sense. I think he was blind, and he could listen for when a witness took a millisecond or so longer to answer a question. And from that, he deduced that the witness was composing an answer in his head, her head, that would be acceptable. Mm-hmm. And that's the area that this lawyer learned to drill down on.
Right. Wow. So don't just be cautious with your words, be cautious with your silences. Wow. Good.
And then what we used to call tells.
Yes.
Certain people will have reactions where, we used to say in my neighborhood, I can tell he's lying, his lips are moving. But yeah, you get these certain tells where someone is feeding you a lie.
Yeah, I would be in trouble with that lawyer because, I take so much. I kind of want to digest whatever question is coming at me before I answer, anyways. So he would think me guilty for every question. Um,
Well, I also think that it doesn't serve the people you're working with, or the challenges you're facing. Like, we want to believe, there are times when we want to believe the best in everyone, right? But they're not going to be able to walk away innocent if you're not able to provide that discerning perspective and help them sort of see the unity of what's going on here. Does
say
that
more
make
about
sense?
that. Rachel,
Yes.
say more about that.
Well, again, my perspective is as a mom of two energetic children.
Right.
And, certainly when I was newer as a parent, earlier on in this journey, a lot of the parenting books talk about how you want to say yes to your children and you want to show them the power of their words, and you don't want to call them a liar. Like you don't want to tell them there's something negative, right? You want to help them grow in their positive light. And as a young impressionable mom or an old impressionable mom, I tried this stuff. But it didn't get me anywhere. It got me kids who worked the system more, and it decreased their own integrity and sense of right and wrong. It became playing the system. They're lovely children, don't get me wrong, but I needed to, instead of assume their innocence, which obviously I knew there was something going on, whatever
Right.
issue it was, but it's that it didn't really help anyone. Like, I like how the paragraph before says you assume they're guilty, and so you can look at them with discernment and really see what is happening, so you can facilitate growth and then walking away innocent, like better people as a result. So that's sort of where, let me just see the quote again, because I kind of.
No, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I can totally see that.
So that's sort of the crux of it, is like,
yeah, it works really well when you have children as well, right? Because we do that all the time with our kids. They come to us with, whatever story they come to us, and then we have to figure out, okay, are they reshaim? Are they reshaim? Yes, they are. Now what?
Right? And it's so frustrating, right? Because you weren't actually there. You don't actually know what happened.
Right.
But if you have an inkling, you have to help them to grow. And they don't grow if they get away with everything.
Right.
So, and I'm sure that in a more profound way, this would reflect on our own inner lives. But actually on that level, and with the level of the people, whether it be children or if we're actual physical judges, I just love the idea from the paragraph before. And then you walk away innocent because you go through the process and you have the growth, and you have, hopefully, depending on the circumstances, a new chance to live a good life.
Powerful. Thank you.
One thing it reminds me of, maybe this is a little tangential, but when I was in school and taking exams, when I took an exam that really challenged me, but that I thought I really learned something from taking it. Oh, wow, look at that. These pieces go together this way. I actually would leave feeling like, hey, that was a good exam. I learned something from that.
Good. So what about Shimon ben Shattach, who says, interrogate the witnesses extensively? So we kind of looked at be cautious with your word lest they learn from them to lie. But what about interrogate the witnesses extensively? We haven't looked at that yet.
There was a physician named Owen who was one of Queen Victoria's physicians and is considered one of the modern one of the fathers of basically family practice in general medicine. And he was fond of saying that if you let your patient talk long enough, he will give you his diagnosis.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I think it's the same thing with interrogating extensively. If you do it long enough, eventually it will come to the truth, whether they want it to or not.
Uh-huh. Anybody else?
To say that lengthy interrogation includes a lot of listening.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of listening.
So to me, again, I mean, those two teachings are deeply connecting me with meditation. I mean, I'm reading those words, and interrogate the witnesses extensively. This is inquiry, right? This is meditative inquiry, right? It's really about your inner experience.
Tell Daddy if you need help.
That is, in fact, your conditioning. That is your conditioning, right? That arises, that is there in front of you, right? Again, like I said earlier, you're in a state of meditation, and suddenly all your truth, all your opinions, all your your personal perspectives, all the things you want and desire, all of that starts to parade in front of you, within you, but in front of your awareness, right? All the stories, all the things you think you know. And the process of meditation is to inquire into the truth of any of that. There is what's her name? The practice of inquiring about the truth of anything, about she's an enlightened teacher. Amy, maybe you can help if you're here. What's her name? It escapes me right now.
Byron Katie.
Thank you. What took you so long?
Couldn't find the unmute.
Got it. So Byron Katie has this complete. She's an enlightened teacher, and the way she supports the people who practice with her is this. Actually, she has sheets that she gives you, where you write out a belief, something you believe, and then she helps you through that form, literally through that form, to look into, to inquire within that belief, right? To interrogate the witness extensively, right? To look at all that and really look at, like, is it true? Is it absolutely true? And she walks you through this several step process up until at the end. Can you look at it from this angle or a different angle? And if you do from this angle, is this reframing your belief? Is it changing what you thought was true? And to me, this is the process really of meditation, right? Interrogate anything you think you know, anything you think. One of my favorite quote is, don't believe anything you think, right? Literally, don't believe anything you think. All right, interrogate, challenge it, seek the truth from within that. I often quote Adyashanti, but he's not the only one. Jed McKenna is another teacher that I like, who says literally his practice is sit down and write and write and write until you're able to write something that is absolutely true. Now go on and practice, right? It's going, on one foot. Now go on and study. right? And until then, keep writing until you can be absolutely sure that whatever it is you're going to write next is absolutely true. Keep on writing. So that's, to me, it's like interrogate the witnesses, right? Be cautious with your words. Like, be cautious, be careful, because your words, in Jewish tradition, words are critical. Like Jewish tradition, because of Bereshit, right? God spoke and the word was, right? There is incredible emphasis on the creative power of words. And we are warned, Lashon Hara, we are warned all over the place in Jewish tradition to be extremely mindful of the words we say, because we understand the power, the creative power of words. I mean, look at the Kol Nidre on Yom Kippur, right? All our vows, in case that we are able to fulfill them between now and next Yom Kippur, can they be removed from us? Like, can we not be held accountable against them in the eventuality that something happens in our life, right? And we're not able to fulfill a vow that we make, right? It's so ingrained in us that the things we say to others, the things we say to ourselves, are really creative of our reality. And we know that self-talk creates the reality we inhabit, right? So be cautious with your words in Jewish tradition is absolutely because your words, not just because we learn not to lie from them, although we are very good at doing that to ourselves as well, right? We can twist our words and rationalize this way or that way. We know how to manipulate not just, those we pick up things from or we hear from, but we are very good at manipulating ourselves. In fact, we're the best at it. To believe whatever it is that we eventually desire to believe, right? We are very good at doing that, because of what makes us feel good, whatever the goodies are. So be cautious with your words, because they're creating, as far as Judaism is concerned, they're creating a false reality. That's what words do. They create a false reality through our stories and our thoughts, right? They really are the most dangerous liars in ourselves. So to me, this is totally about meditation. This is totally about how we move towards awakening, how we move towards dismantling all of that ego narrator of our life, of who we think ourselves to be. Anything else? I mean, we might be able to move to Mishnah 10 today. But if there is something else that someone wants to share, I'd appreciate it. It will be great. It's been fun so far. Okay. Going once, if I had this,
Yeah,
I was just going to add one thing. Sometimes if you meet somebody that you haven't seen for years and years and years, and you start to tell stories, you realize that the way they tell the story is different from the way you tell the story. Because oftentimes you'll get to thinking the way it should have been was the way it was, but it really wasn't.
Oh, when they share a story that is common to the two of you.
Yeah, when you share a story that's common to the two, it's a personal experience between the two of you.
Yeah.
You haven't seen this person for 20 years. You go back up, you meet with them, and all of a sudden, the way you remember it's going to be really different from the way they remember it.
You know who I do that with? I do some premarital counseling when I do weddings. And one of the sessions that I sit together with a couple. I ask them separately while the other listens and can't have any facial expression, can't interject, can't say anything, just listen. I have them tell me or tell each other their meeting story.
Yeah.
Right? Talk about that, the essential core story that a couple has, right? The story of how they met. And I can tell you, there hasn't been a time now, and I've done a lot of weddings, where they told the same story. And it's fascinating, right? And I want to show them that. I want to show them that though we live together, though we share every day together, none of us reads whatever happens through the same filters. And therefore, though we might live through the same story, we do not remember that story the same way. Right? That story doesn't stay with us the same way it stays in somebody else's database, inner database. And I show them, especially when it's their meeting story, right? This is the meeting stories, that the story they separately probably have told all their friends, right? But they never told each other. They never told each other.
No.
And the funny part for me, this is where I torture them a little bit, is to see when the other, starts telling the story, the contraption that the spouse, the future spouse, makes. I mean, they can't help themselves smile or make faces, and it's just fabulous. And again, it's for me, it's about helping them understand that communication is important in couples, because we don't live through the events in our lives. I mean, we go through the same events in our lives, but none of us live through that event exactly the same way, and we forget that. So if you're coupled, I would on the day that you're really in love with each other, tell each other your meeting story and see what happens. It's fun. Yeah, here Rachel just posted that in the chat room. You'll be surprised about dates and times.
Yeah, I imagine you will.
Yeah, I'm literally marrying people that met 2, 3, sometimes 4 years ago at most, right? And they can't even. Was it the summer or was it the winter? Was it in that year? It was. They don't understand. They don't. It's all over the place. It's funny. It's like a big aha moment for those couples, right? It's like, oh my God. That is our story. That is the story that is the base of this relationship that we're getting married now. It's like, and none of us lived it the same way. None of us remembers it the same way. Anyways.
There's a beautiful romantic song called "Yes, I Remember It Well" that goes through that exact. If you ever get a chance to hear it, it's gorgeous, very, very sweet song. But it goes through. That's exactly what the premise of the song is. Right. One person is recalling how they met, and the other one keeps saying, she goes, "I remember you were wearing white," and the other one says, "No, it was green." "Yes, I remember it well." But beautiful song. If you get a chance, look it up.
Yeah, good. Yes. And but again, it's like, if you are a meditator, right? And we're listening to this conversation and we're laughing and we're smiling, right? But listen, underneath that is the lying of our thoughts. I mean, think about the narrative of self. How reliable is the narrative of self that we have built everything on? Who we are, who we who we think we are, who we project ourselves to be, all of those stories that have made who we are, right? I mean, and understand, it's all made up. And someone who was, if someone could have just stood behind us all the way through everything we have lived through, and meet us today and say, okay, this is what happened in your life from where I stood, we would be shocked, right? And to me it's funny but not funny, because in the interrogate the witness extensively, like, we really have to interrogate. the witness within ourselves who witnessed all the things that happen in our life and made decisions about what we stand for, who we are, what we believe, all the things that create the sense of me, right? That is really so fickle, that is so, that really doesn't have, I mean, if you think about what we've been listening to each other saying, it doesn't really have a solid ground on which to stand, right? So that's what meditation teachers will help, so because of that, so the meditation teacher would say, don't be so involved with the thoughts. Don't worry about it. Like, don't really, they're not all they are cracked up to be. Right? See that they are flimsy. See that they don't have a lot of consistency. Don't worry about it, because the thing is, we're so collapsed into them. We so want to believe those stories. We so want to be what they tell us we are, right? That we, in fact, this is really the veil, with the klippah, what the Kabbalists would say, the klippah, right? The veil that is hiding from us the light of our inner being. We're consumed by the outer shell, and we are mesmerized by looking out. And we look out, and all we see is separateness, and we have each other's stories, and we live in that story. We live in a big movie, right? But meditation is like, don't really get so attached to all of those stories and all the thoughts. Yeah, like Karen says, they're just thoughts. They come and they go, right? So the meditation teacher will encourage you to just see thoughts for what they are, to inquire within the nature of what thoughts are, and they're really just nothing. They're we don't even know if any one of them is true, right? Because if we start saying again, like we just were sharing, if we start telling each other stories, right? And everybody has a different version of that story. So what is there really a truth? Is there really something? Is there anything real? Really? I mean, if you take take it, and make it big, right? Which can be challenging for a lot of us because we are meaning-making machines. So the meditation is like, okay, so just stay with the breath. Just don't worry. They'll come and they'll go. Just don't worry, right? So it kind of removes the charge. Again, I use that word once again. It removes the weightness, the weight of those stories, the charge that they have upon us. Suddenly we are a little bit more free. We can breathe, right? Again, you don't have to believe anything you think. You don't have to believe anything you think. They're just thought. Now stay with the breath. Thoughts, they'll come and they go. There's nothing you can do to stop them. So don't worry about it. Just don't. They're not that important. They're not interesting, right? That's what the teachers will always try to get us to understand. They're not interested. They're not interesting. Don't. They're not interesting. They're not there. They're not real. They're right. And eventually, because we will grow more and more disinterested from the thought, then we'll turn our gaze inward. We'll turn our gaze to, okay, so who am I truly? Like now I want to know. If I don't have all the thoughts around, like who am I? Who am I truly? Like where so I call it the flashlight of awareness. So the flashlight of awareness is always busy with the next thought, the next thought, next thought. It's like, okay, so if that's not really interested anymore, I'm not really, so the flashlight suddenly turns towards ourselves. And now we can really discover at the core of who we are, truth. This time with a capital T. Not the little truth with a little t and an S that thoughts bring to our attention. So interrogate the witnesses extensively. Really, really, really interrogate, question. Is this true? What, very important, very important. We have a few more minutes. Are we good to move on, or is there still is there still some energy around this Shimon ben Shattach quote? Okay. All right. So now we have Shemaiah and Haftalion. So Shemaiah and Haftalion. So before we even read the quote, let me tell you quickly who we think they were. No, all of those are real people, by the way, which is always, it's not like in the Torah when we, none of them are real. They are made up characters. But Shemaiah and Haftalion. And the first thing that I notice is that they don't have a ben anything behind their name. So there's a little bit of a shift here. So from the book that I'm using, it says that they were both. So Shemaiah was the Nasi, so the president, and Haftalion was the Av Beit Din, the leader of the Beit Din, the leader of the rabbinic court, and they ruled, or they were in those positions toward the end of the Hashmonean era, which is the beginning of King Herod's reign. That's when they lived. They are both, in fact, descendants, we learn, of the Assyrian king called Sennacherib. And that's actually, they're quoted in another tractate of the Talmud called Gittin. Tractate Gittin 57 folio, it says folio, we say folio 57b, which is page 2, second page. So they are descendants of an Assyrian king. And there is a rabbinic exchange whether they themselves were converts or whether they were both of them were descendants of converts, right? But were themselves born of converted Jewish mothers, right? So some say that the Rambam and Rav, which is one of the greatest Talmudic rabbis, they're saying that they were converts themselves to Judaism. The Maharal of Prague objected to that, saying that converts may not serve in those kind of roles. So the Maharal of Prague said they were descendants of converts instead. And then another rabbi who goes under the name Magen Avot, the Shield of Our Fathers, which is probably the name of his book. Most rabbis eventually became named after their major publication. So the Magen Avot suggests that they were in fact appointed to the Sanhedrin and to their positions, even though they were converts, because there was no one else at the time of a stature such as themselves. They were of great stature, of great knowledge, that would be fit to take those positions. So it's really fascinating, in fact, that we have, whether they were converts themselves or descendants of converts, it is fascinating that they were, in fact, appointed to those kind of major leading positions. And in fact, their name is now literally in the books forevermore. So we will forever remember them. The name Avtalion is a contraction of the Hebrew Av, meaning father, and Talion, which means the young. So it's another way of saying surrogate caretaker. So it's possible that, as I was mentioning that Shimon ben Shattach created the orphanage where children learned, it is possible that Aftalion was the main teacher in the orphanage. So we're not exactly sure, but it seems that he was the leader of the orphanage, and then became the Av Bet Din. So these are who they are, and I think the quote is pretty small as well. So since we are running out of time, I'm just going to read it myself. Shemaiah and Aftalion received the oral tradition from them. Shemaiah used to say, "Love work, hate acting the superior, and do not attempt to draw near to the ruling authority." All right, so that's a very interesting translation. I'm going to read you the translation in my book. Shemaiah says, "Love work, despise positions of power." So it's very different from hate acting the superior. Very different. "And do not become overly familiar with the government." So also very different. Anybody, I know, for example, that Josh, you also are looking at a prayer book. What is your translation there?
It says despise lordliness.
Despise lordliness. Lordliness. Let me see. Sane usna. Oh, okay. So that's gonna be fun. Sna. So sna is literally in Hebrew is to hate. So despise is good. To hate. Sna. Et harabanut. So that's very interesting. So the rabbanut, the way I've
great ones.
What that?
Would that be the great ones?
Yeah, the rabbanut. So the rabbanut. So that's very interesting. So the rabbanut is in if you're part of a religious world, the rabbanut is the rabbinate. Rabbinate.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, it's the rabbinate. So that's very funny. Like, hate the rabbinate. That's what the Hebrew is saying. So we can really. I think we're getting it's getting to be noon now, so we might not be able to pick it up. But it's really fascinating that this is those are the descendants, the fathers of the rabbis. They are the rabbis, and what they're saying is hate the rabbinate, right? How interesting is that? So, but it goes with despise power, or it goes with hate acting the superior. It's fascinating, all of those translation of the word rabbanut. So yeah, it goes. Joshua is right. It's from the word rav. That doesn't mean rabbi. Actually, rav means great. So what was the translation, Josh, again?
Despise lordliness.
Lordliness. Right. So this superior, right? Lordliness. That's. What version do you have?
This is Art Scroll.
Art Scroll. Yeah, I would have guessed. So that's pretty orthodox. Despise lordliness. Lordliness as rabbanut. That's very interesting. So I think this is going to be a good place to stop, because I think it's piqued our imagination, and I want to leave it there. So when we start again in August, in a month from now, we'll pick it right here. Hate the rabbis. No, not the rabbis. The rabbinate. Hate the rabbinate. This is from Pirkei Avot. You've heard it first. All right. Well, thanks everybody for being so engaged and sharing and bring so many perspectives to our conversations. Always enlivening and nourishing. I just always love those Saturday mornings together. We're going to close with a threefold shalom chant. So take a moment to simply close your eyes and find your breath. And we use, those moments to transition. It's like a personal mezuzah. When we move from one room to another, we kiss the mezuzah so that we can enter mindfully into the next space we are going to inhabit. And when we say our shalom at the start and our shalom at the end, it's like kissing the mezuzah, leaving one spaciousness, one place, and moving into the next. And we always seek to move mindfully from one place to the other. So this shalom chant is an invitation for you to move into the rest of your day from this space mindfully with shalom in your heart. And so take a breath for shalom. Thank you.
Thank you. Shabbat Shalom. Have a great vacation.
Thank you. Shabbat Shalom. Yes.
Shabbat shalom.
Thank you. Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shalom. Have a good vacation.
Thank you. Have a great vacation.
Have a good one.
Bye.
Bye.
Take care, everybody.